the last 4 months, and this is the biggest amount of people I've been in front of for a while, so I'm just like, what?
Is there more?
More of that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so the title of my presentation, for those who already know what Fractal is oops, Foom the Fractal, and I'll explain that soon. For those who are new, like plus ones, I have an alternate title, which is Rebuild Civic Society, and I'll explain what I mean by that. By civic society, I mean something that is a network of voluntary bodies which represents the needs of communities and promotes social well-being. This is something that used to be really big in America, in fact, which created America, but since the 1960s, we've seen a huge drop. This is my grandpa, Arthur Alterman, third generation private investigator. My father was the fourth generation. I unfortunately broke that lineage, but never too late. He was not only a PI, he was on the mayor's committee on community relations. He was part of the Boy Scouts. He joined, I don't know if you can see, he joined the Elks, the Masons, the Mayor's Committee, and in the Masons he was some kind of like Grand Master. The Mayor's Committee on Youth Needs, Disabled American Veterans Association, Jewish War Veterans, Police Square Club, and
No, I don't think that was MAGA. The YMCA.
Oh, there it is, down there. And he also did community theater. And that might seem like, you might look at this and be like, holy crap, he must have been some kind of amazing dude. But if you look at kind of any guy who was around back then, and also any lady, they were just involved in this super dense network of civic associations. Things like clubs, professional societies, neighborhood associations. It was just super normal. And we look at this today and we're amazed because since his time, as documented by people like Robert Putnam in his book Bowling Alone, we've seen a huge decline. And this is only up to the year 2000. If you look at when the internet was introduced, it's like taking a nosedive. It's so bad that in 2023, the US Surgeon General put out this thing that probably nobody read, called Epidemic of Loneliness and Isolation. And isolation and loneliness are associated with like every major cause of death. So it's like literally killing people, it's making people unhappy, depressed, sending them to doctors. And so this talk is about one proposed solution to this loneliness epidemic, which is a call for community entrepreneurs. This is like entrepreneurship in any other context where you're starting things from scratch on your own moxie and grit and stick-to-itiveness, but the idea is that you're building communities rather than necessarily a for-profit company, which could emerge from that, of course. So the template here is to, 1, declare yourself a community entrepreneur, 2, build a do-it-yourself civic society, and then 3, template it so other people can copy your template. I hope that sounds easy enough. You know, that might sound daunting off the bat, so I want to talk about a case study, which you're inside of right now, Fractal, which is a civic society started by Andrew and Priya Rose in 2021. And I'm going to talk about how this got started and also what it is. So Fractal is, this is my definition of it. There's no shared definition. But this is the best that we came up with, like on the subway over here, basically. It's a template, meaning like something that can be read and copied. Hey, Bridget. For a civic society, and importantly, a decentralized one. Like there's not a formal hierarchy, at least. There's no board of directors. It's sustained by relationships. And it's one that you can build with your friends. So putting that together, it's a template for a civic society that you can build with your friends that we hope, if successful in this context, we can export to other places. You guys, you could probably sit here if you want.
There's other seats.
Or you can stand. Okay, so why base it on friendships rather than more standard intentional community foundations, of which there are many? People build intentional communities based on belief systems, for instance, a religion, or like a set of values, or let's say like effective altruism or something like that. A common cause, like abolishing an epidemic or something like that. A governance structure, like a DAO or a set of rules. Spiritual practices, or sometimes they build it on economics, like mutual aid and things like that. So why not start with any of these things? Why start with something as informal as friendships? Because I would argue that the bonds formed through friendships are much more enduring than a lot of these other things. I've personally been a part of a bunch of different I've started some social movements, I've been a part of social movements, I've been a part of spiritual practice communities. Inevitably, it tends to be that the bonds are not strong enough to sustain these things over a decade's worth of time, and that's the time horizon I'm thinking about, because I'm hoping to reverse that graph that we saw earlier on the decline of civic society. And I would argue that once you already have the strong bonds of friendship, you can build all these other things on top of them. Once you have a network of friends, you can sit together every Sunday, like at Andrew Blevins' meditation sit, which he just came from. You can organize protests, and you can create your own governance systems. So this is our experiment to work on the loneliness crisis and reweave social fabric. And of course, there's a big question of, will it work? And to that, I say, I don't know. But it's going pretty well so far. So, as evidenced by you people being in the room. So here's the experiment so far. So roughly 4 years ago, Andrew and Priya Rose, who are sitting right here, husband and wife couple, decided they wanted to build something like an urban campus, neighborhood association, something like that. They wanted all their friends to come to one place and work together. So they started by planting the flag. I have a category here called stewardship, which I think is where you begin. You settle in a place, and then you tell people, come here, you plant the flag. And then their particular form of stewardship was that they rented an apartment in the McKibben Lofts, and they had a guest room. So they were constantly ushering friends to come and stay with them, to check out New York City, or if they're in other neighborhoods, to come live there. And then once they had this apartment, they also started hosting weekly gatherings, dinners, so that people would come through, do little presentations, and then get to know one another. So this is an example of, I think, something that can form a seed of a civic society, which has been done through proactive invitations, like I talked about, and also regularity of contact. But regularity of contact could be based on a physical space, or like a housing network, as eventually came to exist in Fractal. Or it could be weekly classes, like a university. Like that could have been a different starting place. We now have Fractal University, which is a network of classes. Or it could be something like a church. And I think that's traditionally how it was done often in America. People would gather every Sunday. But basically, you need these two elements, proactive invitations and regularity of contact, so that you can have a dense enough network of relationships for further branches to grow from the seed, like this. I'll go into first some of the history of Fractal. This was Fractal Phase 1 that started with a housing network inside of the McKibben Lofts. So once that first apartment, once more people wanted to stay in the McKibben Lofts, people started getting leases across the hallway and down the hallway and on different floors. And that gave the amount of proximity and regularity that needed for things to take off. Alongside that, there was a civics organization called Maximum New York that's actually hosting a class, I think in the back room right now.
Yeah, literally right now.
Yeah.
On the history of the New York City subway.
Yeah, sadly I didn't know there was overlap, so you're not going to be able to make it, but if you want to talk about the civics branch of Fractal, meet Daniel Golier, who's in the back. He created Maximum New York, which is like a training program for future NYC civil servants and people who just want to contribute and change the laws and things like that. And also part of Phase 1, there was kind of the equivalent of a digital town square. Like a lot of us were on Twitter and talking to one another already, and like a specific kind of Twitter posting where it wasn't like, here's my new professional advance, but like, my boyfriend just broke up with me, or I drank too much last night. And it would be that kind of informal social contact which created a sense of community even when people were not co-located. So that was Phase 1, which was like the coalescing phase. I would argue that Phase 2 started when third spaces started popping up. And so by a third space, I mean a place that's neither work nor home, but some other place, a third space where you gather. And that was started when Merlin's place popped up. This was created by a guy named Ulysses and Zoo and Doug, where they rented this big apartment and they just started opening it to anyone who was in the network. And so you could come, hang out, you could work. There's a downstairs where you could host movie nights and classes and things like that. And after that popped up, a lot of things started because people started being able to host informal gatherings there, and then they spun out to be their own things. Right, so third spaces. From there, we were able to build a kind of informal community college or university based on the classes that we were hosting there. And then, having gathered all that talent, then we were able to create the Tech Hub, which you're actually in right now. And notably, this was done, like I think people normally think about like, oh, I would love to build an ambitious community, so you probably need a bunch of money, right? Or you need some kind of governance system or set of rules. Or you need some kind of like ideology or cause or something like that. And I would argue, no, no, no. You also don't need to buy a patch of land in order to start a community. I think what this was all founded on was a bunch of people donating voluntary efforts, and then those efforts synergizing. So synergy is a bit of a buzz phrase, but I'll unpack it or with an example to show exactly what I mean. So this is Andrew and Pri Rose giving a talk on the founding of Fractal. And they go through their talk talking about how they started hosting gatherings in their living rooms. That then led to the creation of Merlin's place, which I just mentioned, that living room space for people to host classes, because people came, hung out, liked it, got a lease, and then created their own space. And then because of Merlin's place, I created a residency where I could focus on writing my novel, and then invited a bunch of other people so that they could work on their own creative projects. And then out of that, Andrew Rose created Fractal University. And then out of Fractal University, then we have classes happening back in these living rooms again. So you have like one thing feeding into another, and that kind of spins the whole network up. Now I think the network is ready for Fractal Phase 3, which I'm calling the fooming phase. Does anybody know what the word foom comes from?
Yes.
Who said yes? Loophole kid? Can you explain what fooming is? Or where it came from?
Fooming, from my understanding of it, came from the AI space. And it's the idea that once the AI becomes self-replicating, then we get an exponential explosion of AIs that self-replicating AIs that self-replicate AIs that self-replicate ad infinitum.
Right. So that's the context of the word, although I'm using it in a more abstracted sense, where like once you have a critical mass of different technological improvements, in this case I'm talking about social technology, they can build on one another, and then you have an inflection point where they all start kind of co-catalyzing, synergizing, that kind of thing. And I think this is kind of where we're at now, because we have all these third spaces and clubs and classes and things like that. And I think the fooming phase is where you actually go from just a community, and then through synergy create an actual civic society, which is that interdependent network of associations where people can promote community needs. So notably what I mean by a civic society is not an island enclave for hipster yuppies, which I think a lot of these things have the risk of becoming, but rather I'm talking something that's much more embedded in the broader society, and specifically New York City. And I think at its peak, that can look like what we used to have before the 1960s, where people are super interwoven in their communities. Before I go into the things that I would like to see as part of this fooming process, I thought I'd open it to the audience and ask you guys, like, what would you be served by in a civic society, or what sorts of things would you like to see? So things that you don't feel like you have in your life right now, but then which you could group people together in order to fulfill. So some people have posed, for instance, a cafe, which might get built here, like our own cafe. And yeah, I'm curious for other suggestions before I go into the rest of the presentation. Yes?
One thing is kind of top of my mind looking around the room. So everyone here is exactly 32 and a half years old. And it's hard to find spaces where, you know, you can meet people from like 1-year-old to 60. It should look like quite different from places where everyone is 32 and a half.
Right, some more intergenerationality.
Yeah, right, generally implies family, but just like, I don't know, there's people out there who are like 50 years old who might want to like hang out or contribute something, or teach something, or learn something. Like, where are they? What are they doing? Like, I don't really know. I don't have a lot of 50-year-old friends.
Yeah. Yeah, me neither. They're all at the Y on 92nd Street or something.
I will say we've got a couple of very young looking 32-and-a-half-year-olds over there.
Yeah, it's like, I can physically pick up my 3-year-old and bring her.
I think that is very.
Like, somewhere in between.
I think that is very important, and figuring out how to make that easy. And I think that groups make that really easy, like exponentially. So one person willing to hold a kid for a little while. So I'm doubling down on that.
Yeah, so if you guys are free at 2 p.m., we'll actually have a talk from Bea on
making communities family friendly and yeah,
I really
figuring
set you
all
up
that
for
out.
that one.
Yes.
I don't know if it would be like a physical thing, but just like a concept or a class of just group discussion on mental health and just like kind of a group therapy session, which I've never done before, but I think it would be interesting to have a space where we can discuss each other's mental health things that people are working through, and I think that there would be really new and interesting conversations that I particularly haven't had.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at traditional civic societies, they're full of like grief rituals. For instance, in the Jewish community, you have everyone come together and sit shiva when someone has died. And so, like, what could be our equivalent of that? I think, Max, you've been thinking about that somewhat.
I also think, and this I think requires a specific availability, but some degree of excursioning of where you really are kind of fully present and going somewhere with a group of people can, like, I think really forge powerful connections, whether it's like even just camping or thinking.
Yeah, adventures.
Adventures.
I want a chamber
Yeah,
of
yeah,
commerce.
What's that?
Chamber of commerce.
You want a chamber of commerce?
Yeah.
What does that mean for you?
Chamber of Commerce is like a big network of business owners, entrepreneurs, and finance and like just commerce people basically who meet and form a civic society for the purpose of helping other people do commerce with each other. So you're basically like greasing the wheels of commerce in your society. New York City has one, and we could work with them, and they would like working with us. They'd be very open to that, and also NYC EDC, which is the Economic Development Corporation, would be happy to work with us, I'm sure. But like, there's a way in which we can interface better with those by having some micro Chamber of Commerce as well.
Totally. Yeah, I think traditionally this would often just be like churches, right? You would have local communities inside of a city gather at church and network there, but we don't really have the equivalent of that anymore. Would you go ahead one?
Yes, Fractal Arts Hub.
Yeah.
Of the Tech Hub, where we have studios for artists of all stripes, and we can make loud noise and scream late into the night.
As
and
artists do.
then downstairs we have a huge space where you can display art or put on shows or do weird theater kid experiments, and it's also a cafe and a nightclub and dreaming big. Yeah.
I'm thinking sort of vaguely of like media. Like I know we have the Discord, and I know Twitter used to be a useful place, but like I'm thinking a bit about like older internet, like where it was cozier, like there were forums and stuff. I feel like some sort of thing, whether it's like more newsletter, like old internet forums, is something that like a digital third space that felt more real than Discord.
Yeah, it's an interesting challenge because right now there are like 3 Discords, 20,000 WhatsApp groups.
Right, and you don't just like go on Discord on like your computer, you know what I mean? It's not like a place, it's more like a tool, which is fine, I like tools, but like I feel like some sort of like, or maybe a variety, especially if there were like an art studio, like ways of experimenting with like media. Some things more like newsletters, some things more like forums or channels, but I think that would be really like generative.
I like that. Sai, who unfortunately couldn't make it today, was creating zines
Oh,
for
cool.
a group of people. If you're interested, put me in touch.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, one thing that you and I have talked about, one of our first conversations was what you called the hippie spaceship, which is this idea of like we don't want this to be an island, but there has to be meaningful ways to interface with the larger community. And I think, Andrew, what you mentioned of the Chamber of Commerce is an interesting thought, but I do think that finding points of connection with the larger world so that this all not only is like part of the larger world, but we're also not in a feedback loop of like, you know, what are the issues that this group cares about versus the larger issues of society, and that there's like interface between those. I do think that Fractal can be pretty insular and not have as many kind of external points of contact.
Yeah, very much agreed. Alan?
Yeah, a way to like aggregate funds together to create some sort of seed or DAO to like launch some of these magical dreams that people are talking about.
Totally. Yeah, it'd be sweet to have a funding network that is funding community projects like across, not just Fractal, but across the entire broader network.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you have a follow-up?
Well, just to that, there's a
You both have follow-ups.
there's a foundation called the Awesome Foundation, which somebody just told me about, which is essentially a group of people that come together, put their money into a pot, and then vote on one thing to fund per month. It's like
That's
a
cool.
revolving loan.
I like
The
that.
archive at SF did this.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, that might be the Awesome Foundation you're talking about.
It might be. It might be the
Because they
extension
created
of
this thing
that.
called the Awesome Fund.
I think we should pilot that internally here.
I think there's also the Civic Joy Fund, which Manny, you feel like had a big part of in San Francisco. I think with that same vision of Manny's not just being its own insular community where like there were these events, but also connecting it with the neighborhood it existed in quite a bit.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, I had a follow-up inspired by your comment about like interfacing with the larger world and like what do people care about sort of out there, which is that there's like a lot of instability right now, like put it mildly, but also kind of like an exodus. So like a lot of people that were in their own silos, like whether that's like bureaucracy or media or research, like what's happening now at universities is like, I don't know, a lot of people being like, I'm getting out of here. And so this is kind of a bad thing, like on net, but I think there's more people than ever now that are kind of becoming like disembedded and looking for something, or could end up in something like this, or could become like totally alienated from society. So it might be like a really useful time, like if like we acted quickly to be able to like kind of create on-ramps for different kinds of people to like join or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the hope, especially with the idea of replicating the template and having there be many different versions
Yeah.
that people can try. Jeffrey?
I think that a great thing having some sort of skill directory that's putting
Yeah.
people here. And I also feel like when it comes to being more intergenerational, mentorship is a really great way to get people who are older and have more
Someone
skills.
writing these down?
That
Wait, you writing these down?
Yeah, I got you. It's a great way, you know, there are differences that people who are older want to pass their skills on. That's a really great way for them to feel connected and a part of the community if they don't have everything else in common.
That's so smart. Yeah, I was thinking about how to get older people involved in it. I'm like, would they come and hang out with these 32-and-a-half-year-olds? I'm not sure, but maybe as mentors they would.
I think they would come hang out with babies, honestly.
That's how I'm getting my parents in. My plan for the next couple of years is to get my parents in, and then they can take care of, hopefully, my future babies and my sisters as well, with my collaboration.
Ideally.
Yeah. All right.
I hesitate to say this because it gets a little hairy sometimes with like, I don't know, like service organizations, but I feel like one of our needs as a community is to be of service, to like give what we can and feel that it made an impact. It feels really good and it like builds our connection to the community around us. And it would feel great to have some sort of ongoing conversation about like, what do we have in excess that we can just give away? We've got like lots of time and a lot of different skills, and how can we make that feel really good and sustainable and fun and not get sort of on our high horse about, oh, we're this like do-gooder organization or something, but still get to feel in touch.
Yeah, I think that's essential. That's something I would want to like have in the DNA before we replicate. Rachel?
Yeah, with sustainability, the sustainability of people's energy in projects is something that we, like, it's like you can get a bunch of people excited about things, but how long does the sustainability of keeping the ball going, and how do we all share the energy of that project?
Yeah.
And that's technology perhaps more than like I don't know what it is, but it's the momentum to keep it going.
And then how do you maintain intimacy as the ecosystem grows, like along
Yeah,
those lines?
that's really big. That's the main thing I'm scared of with scaling.
Yeah.
Which is partially why I'm pro like cell division rather than necessarily becoming huge. Because I think if you lose the relationships that things founded on, then you just get normal society that as it currently exists.
And then those cells can be interconnected.
Right, exactly. Okay, so I will go into some of my thoughts. Here are some things I would like to see. Like Hart said, I would love to see a service division that's both doing local service and maybe more like global efforts, since we have a lot of talent in the room. Maybe some things more. Now, we have a smattering of meditation groups and people getting together, and it might be nice to have our equivalent of like, I don't know, an official Sangha or like a church for Christians, whatever. Daycare, which I hope we'll have in the next couple of years for parents. I think unless you have daycare, it's not very attractive for the thing to become intergenerational. Oh, did that just break?
Yeah, I also need a chair.
Yeah. That's probably not your fault. Art Collective, which Bridget mentioned. Oops. Oh, sorry. Homeschooling Network, Art Collective. Media Empire. I'm imagining like a conglomerate that consists of like a film studio, maybe also content network, and we have a few books coming out in the community, so it would be nice if we could like capture the profits and bring them into the community rather than give them to some other publishing house. Media Empire. Social services, like sustaining energy on projects, maybe people doing career counseling, that kind of thing. Psychology and coaching. I would love to see a workshop where we have like a CNC machine and do woodworking. A business network, a chamber of commerce, like you said, Andrew. Healthcare, I think this is going to become increasingly important, especially as people's parents move in. Like, I think it would be nice if we had some form of elder care. Also, we see a vast increase in the amount of complex chronic conditions that the existing medical system is not really equipped to handle. And so I think with the advent of AI tools, we could probably have some kind of really cool offering for people suffering from, I don't know, long COVID or some other mysterious ailment. I have my own mysterious gut condition. And then neighborhood associations, kind of like you mentioned, Max. Like, I think it'd be sweet to get the block involved. I think Tammy wants to chime in. Yeah, I have a few friends who've gotten their neighborhood in like WhatsApp groups so that people can like do everything from share salt when they run out of salt to, you know, give out emergency loans if someone is suffering economic hardship. I think that'd be really cool. I think it'd be nice to have a festival, like our own kind of Burning Man, where we could invite our friends from across the world. And a rural campus, which we actually have a friend currently kind of working on. With a retreat center and a farm would be really sweet, because I think it's kind of impossible to live in New York City unless you have a place to escape like once every couple months. It just destroys you, but otherwise I think it can be fantastic. Oh, and to support this all, like you said, Alan, it'd be nice to have some form of project support, like Angel Network, a philanthropic fund, maybe some kind of incubator for new companies, Y Combinator style. It'd be nice to also have some body for emergency preparedness, because I think this whole thing that we built over the last 4 years could dissolve if there's another pandemic, or like what if there's some kind of war. Like, I think the default is that it disintegrates and then people go back to their atomized situations. So figuring out some kind of plan in case shit hits the fan, I think could be good, not just for this particular community, but could be traded amongst lots of other communities if we come up with a protocol there. Each of these different things I would like to see also have like a bunch of sub things that I would like to see that I won't go through now because you've been here for like an hour. But in case you are curious, I have this map online, and you can scan this QR code, and it goes into each of these sub bullets in terms of, I think, things that would be really cool to see. So I'll step out of the way for you to get that. Okay, cool. This will come up at the end too. So how can this all be done? I propose the foomula, or as I like to call it, the foomula. And I think the foomula has already been created. I think it's responsible for the existence of this, us all sitting in the room, and it looks kind of like this. So I would say one big, there are no formal values of Fractal, and I think that's part of what makes it magical. Like, nobody's imposing a value, but there are emergent values. And I think one that we see is a focus on self-actualization, on people gaining more and more agency and capability. We have containers for that. So things like residencies, which we've thrown, Fractal University, which has a bunch of different classes on everything from computational biology to Buto to creating communities like this. And then I think that feeds into this broader sense of collective agency. So part of how the Tech Hub came about is we threw a big barn raising. So we had tons of people come together to help with that and getting people to be members and fundraising and stuff like that. And then we also, Hart created this thing, Thirst Trap, which was, I think it used 5 or 6 different apartments in the McKibben Lofts, and it was an immersive theater event where every single apartment was like its own world. And it had a staff of like 50 people running the whole thing, from actors to producers. And these are the sorts of acts of collective agency that I think you can see if your community is focusing on making people more powerful. And all this is powered at the center by a kind of emergent value of cultural innovation. And what do I mean by that? I give a few examples here. One is, I think Fractal is interesting for having this kind of internet synergy. It has a huge extended network of probably like a few thousand people as part of what's called this part of Twitter, or Teapot. And a lot of the people who come to Fractal, like Loophole Kid, would you say you heard about Fractal from Twitter?
Yeah.
And maybe Sheik, you did too?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like a lot of people in this room are here because we have this like bigger public square. And this is an interesting community format. Typically you either have communities that are mostly online and maybe they meet in person like once a year, or they're mostly in person and it's through intimate social relations. Fractal is interesting in that it has both, and that opens up like tons of possibilities for collaboration. Another piece of social innovation is the kind of Friends lifestyle at scale, like the TV show Friends, where if you live in the McKibben Lofts, you can literally just walk down the hall, and often you don't even have to knock if you're friends with the people. You just like go inside their apartment and hang out on their couch. And I remember watching the TV show Friends and thinking, when I saw it, like, that would be beautiful. Too bad it's impossible. Turns out that's not true. This is when I lived in apartment 1N, which we called the Goblin Zone. Living rooms as third spaces. I don't know why this isn't more common. It's really easy to just open up your living room for classes and events and gatherings. And I have a lot of friends who do that, but it's not yet like widely known social technology. Identity play. This is a weird strand that popped up in the last year. It's people started with a class that I did with Allie. Allie, are you here? Yeah. Do you want to explain identity play?
Sure. So Tyler and I created identity play, a sort of experimental alter ego creation technology. It started with a conversation where Tyler was like, there are things that I want to do in my life that I feel like, you know, myself as I know myself, I'm not able to do or I'm not capable of. And I was like, same, how do we remedy this? And we said, well, what if, you know, I come from a more or less classical but also experimental theater background. Tyler has had experiences in different like theater traditions. So we said, what if we could create a methodology to help folks create alter egos to then deploy to do things in their life that they otherwise wouldn't be able to. And it's still, I think, developing.
Yeah. Well, we started with a class, and then we took it really far, which is then after the original identity play class, a bunch of us got together, about 10, and created alter egos of world historical figures who we then pretended to be for 3 weeks in order to unblock our creative projects. And then the last week was 24/7 in character, which I would not recommend, but it is an area of active research, and it does seem to be really effective for shorter periods of time. And now we have a few other classes that are experimenting with this kind of thing. More social experimentation. Baby co-working. I think one problem with making our community intergenerational is if you want to do projects with other people, you need your kids to be watched at the same time. And so this was an experimental format we did for a few months where when Artemis was first born, we had people sign up for babysitting slots, and Andrew and Priya told us how to like change diapers and burp Artemis and carry her around. She really liked being walked around the yard. So we signed up for slots, and then we alternated co-working or babysitting. And actually, a lot of people said they were more productive than they would have been otherwise because the baby like calmed down their nervous system. So co-working should be done. There are also like an enormous amount of social experiment parties. This was my birthday last year, where the theme was wish fulfillment, and I had everyone enter wishes that they wanted a group of people to fulfill on a spreadsheet that then I projected in Merlin's place, which I mentioned earlier. And so each slot of 10 minutes is someone fulfilling a different wish. Like one person never got to dance the hora at her bar mitzvah, so she had people like prop her up in a chair and dance around her and sing and I call this out, and you know, you might look at this and be like, okay, that's cool, but it's like a little bit trivial, like just a bunch of people having fun. But I would argue, even though it might be trivial, I would dispute that it's trivial, but it might be trivial in the hands of just like a group of people who are just fucking around once in a while. It starts becoming a different thing if your goal is to start socially experimenting to reweave civic society, where it's still just as much fun, but then you have this broader purpose where it's research. So if you have a format like this of getting people's wishes fulfilled, I mean, that's kind of what like life is about, to go out and get your wishes fulfilled. And if you have a format like this that works, well then that's maybe something other people can play with. And so that's part of my broader vision of this whole thing, where we're starting with Fractal in New York, but if we're having fun and then socially experimenting while we're doing it, that sort of thing could be scaled to a bunch of other places. I think people don't realize the amount of social possibility that there is. And then these different things could be internetworked and feed off one another. And you know, what would that look like at scale? I don't know. I think it would be something really special that maybe we haven't seen yet.
Airships.
Huh?
Yeah, airships.
Airships?
Airships.
Oh, airships.
Yeah.
We could bring back airships.
We need a
I'm
navy.
being completely serious.
I want airships.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah,
Well,
Zeppelins.
one airship.
You want one airship?
Yes.
Not multiple? Come on, dude.
We can talk about that when we get there.
So you might look at all this and be like, okay, cool vision, bro, but is that actually going to happen? And maybe it will, maybe it won't, but I think it's nobody's job to make it happen. So it's going to depend on largely the people who are watching this right now. So in phases 1 and 2 of Fractal, we gathered this critical mass, I think, of talented people to start building this civic society. And now something really impressive has resulted. And now it's time to get to work. So you might look at all this also and have another question, which is like, wow, how do I get involved? Like, how do I start building this civic society? It's a very common question amongst even people who've been involved for like 2 years. Like, how do I get involved? I'm like, you are involved. But to be more specific, since we're talking about a civic society, it's not like a normal thing that is in American society anymore. It's largely dissolved, and it doesn't look like something that has some mysterious executive board somewhere that's deciding what you should do and directing and allocating talent. It doesn't look like that. It also doesn't look like listening for a corporation or a school or even an organizational structure to tell you what to do. I think we're very much in the mode of gathering friends and then founding things together, like the Foundation of America. And that's like a fundamentally different paradigm than like waiting for some overlord to be like, hey, I notice there's a problem over here, like I need you to solve it. Like you kind of just need to have your eyes and ears open and be noticing what you want to have happen and then building it yourself. But notably, I'm saying we want founders, and I'm not talking about martyrs. Notice I didn't say martyrs. We don't want that, because I think we are trying to build a kind of new paradigm of what it means to live in civic society. And ideally that paradigm looks something like this Howard Thurman quote, which is, don't ask what the world needs or what your civic society needs. Ask what makes you come alive and do it, because the world needs more people who have come alive. And so that's my overall vision for what this whole thing looks like. Like the whole point of it is not to just build more, it's to come alive. And so I think the process of this looks like, you know, you could look at a map like this or have one in your own head and then think about what makes your heart come alive. Maybe it's coming up with social services, maybe it's building an alternate civics thing to compete with Maximum New York. I think that would be welcome. Maybe it's like doing some stewardship and hosting weekly dinners. But you find that thing that makes your heart come alive. Step 2 is then you just take ownership. Like you're not waiting for the board of directors, you're just saying, okay, I claim this. And then you ask for help. And I would say that you're amongst a group of people who are unusually helpful. This is the Fractal Tech fundraising that happened in August. And as you'll see, we had like, I mean, 50 people, 60 people come together. 60 people.
Well, hot summer outfit.
Summer.
Showing skin, looking good.
I don't know if you saw it, but as it was rotating, somehow there was someone in the network who heard about it happening, and they built like an improvisational coffee stand. Like a professional one where they had a barista, and they were doing like double shot cappuccinos, and it was crazy. And that's what's available to you. So then there's step 4, which is to actually build it. If you're sitting in the audience, you might think after this whole presentation, you're like, wait a minute, like, are you hoodwinking me here? Like, so it turns out there is a purpose to Fractal. It's not just a society of friends. You're secretly trying to trick me into rebuilding society toward a utopian outcome or something like that. You know, and I thought Fractal was not about ideology, but friendships. And I would continue to say it isn't. This is like, I'm not speaking on behalf of Fractal. There's no one who can do that. I'm just saying what I would like to see. And what that includes is also if you have some random college friend. Actually, my college friend is here. And they want to come hang out, or if this is my sister, like I don't think she's going to be like building. Maybe she will. I don't know. I don't think she's going to be building like some institution inside of our civic society. But if these people want to just come hang out, like specifically even here, and just lounge, like that's what we're doing the whole thing for. We're doing this to have a flourishing life for our friends and our families and for ourselves. And that's what an actual civic society is, like that is the purpose of building this whole thing. To have this kind of like purposeless place where people can just be and work on the projects that they want. Okay, so this is what I would like to see. All these different functions in our particular civic society. I would also like to see it duplicated across the world. And this is my personal invitation, not an official invitation, but my personal invitation to work with me on it. Let's fucking go. And if you're intrigued by this idea and want to like brainstorm on it and start working on things, I'm thinking of maybe hosting some kind of civic society hackathon. So feel free to scan this QR code. It goes to the same place as before, and it has like a little sign-up form where you just put your name and email.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.